I have the pleasure of introducing you to Greg Hallett. Greg and I have been corresponding now, but I will leave Greg to explain who he is, and then we can chat about the Lisbon Treaty and talk about the Queen too. So welcome, Greg. Who are you?
Well, apparently I'm the King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland. And there are a lot of marks in that direction. And I lodged an affidavit in court, and I'm just looking at it now. And it's about 300 pages, and it covers that the Queen is not the Queen, and it shows how she's not the Queen, and how the Privy Council knows that she's not the Queen, and her signing the Lisbon Treaty is absolutely in line with her not being the Queen. And I'm going to allude to a few of the ways that she has abdicated to me. I've mentioned in previous interviews how she's abdicated to me by royal styles and titles, by putting Elizabeth to Greg on the coins, by flying a plane over me in a crisscross fashion on a certain day, dropping down to 1,150 feet in half speed. How I've had 7 helicopters from Sandringham flying directly overhead, all in every direction, all at once.
Right, okay, right, we'll stop you there. Greg,
and
you live in the UK?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
When did you discover that you had a greater right to the throne than the Queen Elizabeth?
When I was chosen to be the royal biographer and presented with the chest full of royal marks that Queen Victoria gave her firstborn legitimate son, Prince Marcos Manuel, and I was asked to decodify them, photograph them, handle them, photograph them, and break the codes on them. And once I'd done that, I was then told that if I went to England, I wouldn't have to do anything. And if I was the king, the whole British royal family would fall apart in front of me. And that's what we're looking at now, is the entire British royal family falling apart. So,
where did you come from? Where did you actually come from then?
New Zealand.
Right.
Right. So there are a lot of codes, and New Zealand is known as Aotearoa. Aotearoa means land of the long white cloud. And the King of England, in the tradition received, has to descend from the clouds, right? And for the English, going from London to, let's say, Scotland, which is north, you go down to Scotland, right? So when you go, when the English talk about going north, they say, I'm going down to Scotland, yeah?
Right.
So heading from New Zealand to England is going down, is descending, right? Descending is heading north.
Okay.
So I had to descend from the cloud, and I had to be a Lemurian to break the codes. And a Lemurian is someone from New Zealand, Australia, and Papua New Guinea. So what Elizabeth did was renew the royal styles and titles in 1973, 74, 75 in Australia, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea, which are on the same tectonic plate, which is Lemuria. So the way she marked me in that is the 1973 royal style and title for Australia was on the 14th of September. And then there's 1974 was New Zealand, and 1975 Papua New Guinea on the 16th of September. So the mid date is the 15th of September 1974, which is my birthday, and it was my 30th birthday, which is like a bar mitzvah. Have we got someone else on the line? It's like I can actually hear MI6 crackling a call, like.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me.
I can actually hear them. I can hear them.
Like, really? I can't hear anything, but I haven't got the equipment you've got.
Well, I've just got a Mac, but it's like someone's talking on the machine, you know. Yeah, he's on now. We're listening. Really, you can't hear it.
No.
Okay, so that was the Royal Styles and Titles, and then she put my name on the coins first on the 23rd of April 1968 on the 5p coin, and lastly on the £2 coin on the 15th of June 1998, and that is 11,011 days apart, and the number 11 means the letter M, so it reads M0M, which spells mum, right?
Right.
Right.
Were these coins in general circulation?
Yeah. There's when I turned 56, there were 56 billion coins that read Elizabeth II Greg. Right. It actually reads Elizabeth II DG Reg. Right. But DG is Duke Governor, and Prince Regent Duke Governor means king to be, and I hold the royal mark of the Prince Regent Duke Governor. Right, it says PRDG on that, and this is the key to the Rosicrucian cosmography, which is the key to the kingship of North America.
Greg's just holding up a key to the screen, so for people who wanted to see that, it will be on YouTube.
So
but they can't see it on Facebook. That's all.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. I've done it on my website www.kingof.uk. I did 4 interviews they cut down to about an hour 20 each, and they explain the Rosicrucian cosmography, how it gives my name, and that was drawn by Sir Walter Raleigh, and it was issued 2 weeks before his supposed execution, and he put my name on the Rosicrucian cosmography, and he sat in the same place I used to sit in the Algarve. It all happens in the Algarve, and drew the view from the Algarve and then put my name on it, and then left 2 blanks either side, which is for this, right? And it was the male and female Sangreal that gave me this key, which is the key to Sir Walter Raleigh.
So you're saying, right, so this is quite a lot for my brain to take hold of, to handle. I don't know about anybody at home. Right, so you were born in New Zealand.
Yes.
You moved across to become the Queen's biographer.
No, I moved across to become the royal biographer. Right, I was working for Queen Victoria's great grandson, who has male primogeniture. He's the primary descendant, right, of Queen Victoria, and he's actually the true Prince of Wales. So we wrote 5 volumes together. It took 4 years.
So did Queen Victoria actually have children with Prince Albert?
No.
None.
None. Prince Albert died a virgin, and he was illegitimate. He wasn't Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. He was Albert of Saxony, not even a prince. He was illegitimate. He was the son of the stable boy Alex Hanstein, who then married his mother, Princess Louise, and then she died soon after, like within about 3 years. And he used to carry her body around hotels in Europe, her embalmed body. So it was all very nutty. And
why did he do that? Why did he carry his mother's? So this is Prince Albert carrying his mother's embalmed body around.
Prince Albert's biological father used to drag his dead mother around hotels in Europe, including Paris, for 3 years. And it made
by the way, for anybody watching on Facebook, can they please share this video whilst we're live streaming? Because it's always so interesting to be watching a live stream and be able to put comments up on Facebook. So we're going on to you.
But you know, a lot of the comments will come from ignorance. I've actually covered a lot of this material before in other interviews, but you asked me for some background, so I'm giving you a very brief background before I get into the actual meat of the interview. Yes.
Are we going to talk about you? We mentioned off air. We mentioned about Queen Elizabeth II was actually born from a maid, not.
Yeah. Can I just mention one other mark? One other mark. So I've said that Elizabeth, she gave me the royal styles and titles, right? So I'll just finish that story briefly. I'll tell you the story briefly so that you get it, and then on other videos I've done the details, right? So she gave me the royal styles and titles. She named my birthday in the royal styles and titles. Now, the royal style and title of New Zealand was actually done in 1974 on the 6th of February, which is the anniversary of King George VI's birthday. And it was Death Day, right, which is actually New Zealand Day called Waitangi Day. And it was done on the 6th of February because King George VI died on that day, exactly 1952 to 74, 22 years later. 22 years earlier, and 22 is the number MM, and MM is Freemasonry's highest order, right? And King George VI had a son in New Zealand, and King George VI and Queen Elizabeth II Sergeant Surgeon was Lord Arthur Espy Porritt, and he came third in the Chariots of Fire 100-meter sprint at the Olympics in 1924, and he came out to New Zealand to become the Governor General. And I met him on a Sunday and with my father, and he said, "Why don't you take your son down to see King George VI's son in Rotorua?" So 20 months after Elizabeth was born, King George VI had a son which outranked Elizabeth, and he was George Fitzratimer, or Kingy George VII, and I had a private meeting with him on the same day that the coins changed from British pounds and pence to New Zealand dollars and cents, which is the 10th of July 1967. And the crown, the British crown, which was a coin, was retained in New Zealand unofficially, but it was retained in New Zealand and still used in 1971, 4 years later, and I still saw them around in 1973. So they changed the coin on the same day that I met Kingy George VII, and the crown was retained in New Zealand. And all of these things are symbolic, and none of them happen by accident. Like George VI and Queen Elizabeth II both sent their Sergeant Surgeon to New Zealand to meet me, to introduce me to George VI's legitimate son, or basically George VI was sent to New Zealand to have a child with New Zealand's most spiritual woman, Guy Rangi. She was tapu, which means sacred. And then so then I was the one chosen to have a meeting with him on that auspicious day, which was the retaining of the crown. Now, on the 19th of March 2017, Queen Elizabeth contracted a person who was born pretty much on Coronation Day to go into the National Gallery at London. The National Gallery overlooks Charing Cross, where the king is announced, the new king is announced. And he went into the National Gallery, into room 34, which is one above Illuminati. And there was a Gainsborough painting in room 34, which was in the James Bond movie Skyfall, which is about M dying, right?
That's interesting. I've just been talking about James Bond, yeah.
Yeah, so he went in with a drill bit and scratched the Gainsborough painting, Elizabeth Marries Hallett. Right? It's a big Gainsborough painting. It's about 3 meters by 5 meters, or 9 feet by, was it? Maybe 7 feet by 10 feet. You know, it's a big painting, 12 feet. It's a huge painting. You know, when you look at it, you're standing back 6 paces away from it. You look at it like that. You know, you have to stand actually across the other side of the room to see it. It's huge. And he scratched it with a drill bit. Now, drill is DR, which is doctor, doctored, and Ilbert is Elizabeth, doctored by Elizabeth, right? It's another code, right? But so she's trying to put me on the coins, give me the crown, give me the royal styles and titles, and marry me, and declare that she's my mother, which is, you know, on the coins, and then marry me, which is the Egyptian pharaohic tradition. And in the Rosicrucian cosmography, which is a one-page drawing, which is a summary of a book of predictions, that names me Joseph Gregory Hallett, and then three-quarters of the way up the top it says Tut, as in King Tut, and it's done in Memphis-style lettering. And the Egyptian pharaohs had a tradition where the mother would give birth to the pharaoh, and when the father died, the mother would marry the son, you know, symbolically, or, you know, co-rule. So
how does the Egyptian work with the UK?
Queen Nefertiti used to holiday exactly where I am in England, in East Anglia.
Did she?
Yeah. And the churches around here, there's about 660 of these square churches with flintstone in them. And they are all a subconscious imagery of Queen Nefertiti. Yeah.
Right.
So,
you learn a new thing every day.
Yeah, and there's a particular spring here about 30 minutes north of me and about 20 minutes east of Sandringham House that has a really good quality water. It's a very healing water, a very energizing water. And people used to sail for the holidays just to be near a revitalizing water source or a hot water source, you know. So what's happened is I've been given a letter, and the letter was written by Queen Victoria, and it was originally sent to her firstborn legitimate son, which she had with blind Prince George of Cumberland, who was second in line to the throne. And they were born, Victoria and blind Prince George were born 3 days apart, and they were childhood friends, and they conceived a child when they were both 14 and married, and then Victoria gave birth 7 weeks later. And the marriage was witnessed by King William IV, which was Victoria's uncle, right? And then
she had a child at the age of 14.
Yeah, the legal age of marriage then was 10.
Right, that's interesting then, isn't it? Because I noticed that a lot of people who talk about Islam, they talk about the age of consent. But in the UK, the age of consent was age 10 at that point.
Yeah, up until 1900.
Right.
And up until 1900, an orphan meant someone without a father. Now it means someone without either parent. So Prince Marcos Manuel was delivered by Queen Victoria's cousin, who was 3 years old, he was 17, Prince Ferdinand of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha-Kahari. So he ended up inheriting the Hungarian-Austrian Empire. So he took Prince Marcos Manuel to Portugal and delivered him to a convent in Lisbon on the 6th of October 1834, which is, can you hear that?
Yes, I can hear something.
Yeah, it was worse before. That's just air from like police, traffic, MI5, you know. They always listen in, but you know. So Prince Marcos Manuel was in the convent where, up until the age of 16. He was in there for a total of 145 days, and the rest of the time he was taken care of very well by nannies. And then he ended up, Queen Victoria's governess of all the royal children, who was the Prime Minister's daughter, Lord Palmerston the Mongoose, Lord Palmerston's daughter, Viscountess Frances Jocelyn. She was the governess of Queen Victoria's children, all of them. And she brought the chest full of royal marks out to Lisbon and showed them to Marquis Manuel, who was an orphan, thought he was an orphan. And he was told when he's 16, as soon as he turned 16, like about 5 days later, that Prince Marquis Manuel, you were the son of Queen Victoria and a very high-ranking person, which turned out to be the second in line to the throne, blind Prince George of Cumberland, who became blind King George V of Hanover. So then I was brought in to, then he was photographed with the 6 princesses of Europe who were most close in age to him, and then he went to the Isle of Wight and lived there for 5 years as a gardener with his mother, Queen Victoria. Right? And that's why she lived on the Isle of Wight, so that no one could see her true son.
No one could see her true
Son, her legitimate son, because the Rothschilds had won the breeding rights to the British royal family. They bought them after they bankrupted the British royal family over the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, and Queen Victoria was born in 1819. Right? So then the Duke of Wellington, when Queen Victoria was 10, he purposefully opened the door to Princess Victoire Louise, and which is Queen Victoria's mother. This is when Queen Victoria was Princess Victoria and just 10 years old, but I'll call her Queen Victoria. It's a lot easier. So Queen Victoria is 10 years old, and the Duke of Wellington knows what's going on, that the Rothschilds have taken over the breeding rights of the British royal family. So he opens the door and shows Queen Victoria, aged 10, that her mother, Princess Victoire Louise, is having sex with her secretary, Sir John Conroy. And that woke up Victoria sexually. So then she was actually quite forward in the garden with princes, but she absolutely loved and always loved blind Prince George of Cumberland, and they loved each other, you know, from a very young age. They were childhood sweethearts. So that meant that Prince Marquis Manuel was the product of the first and second highest ranking people in the British royal lineage. So he ended up having incredibly high titles, and then he was given the sword of the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, the German sword, by Duke Ernst II of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and on the 10th of June 1869. And then Queen Victoria made Prince Marquis Manuel King of England, King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland on the 6th of October 1869, and to mark that day she opened the Holborn Viaduct and Blackfriars Bridge on the same day. Right, opening 2 bridges on the same day is extraordinary, but also making your 35-year-old son the King of the United Kingdom and also using the correct sword is extraordinary. And then on Leap Day 2012, I was given that sword. And on my Facebook page, I've just put up myself with the sword, and I'm about 3 paces inside, and I'm holding the sword. And although I'm inside a large room, which is about 9 meters by 9 meters, that was my hotel room, the sword is just, I'm just looking at it talking, and the sunlight is reflecting on it, but I'm 3 meters inside the building and there's no direct sunlight on it. So how does that work? And people in the know look at that, they go, wow, that's really impressive, you know. It's like the sword was responding. So I was given the true sword of the King of England. And then I was given, when I handed it back, I was given a letter from Queen Victoria saying, assemble him claimant, which is the letter that Queen Victoria wrote for her firstborn and only legitimate child, Prince Marcos Manuel, on the 17th of March, 1850, which is St. Patrick's Day. So it means to include all of Ireland. So,
right, okay. So to fast forward then, she died in 1901,
01. Yeah.
at which time the Rothschilds were well and truly embedded in the royal family. You've picked up on the fact that I've been doing some videos on the Lisbon Treaty earlier in the year.
Yeah.
The Lisbon Treaty was kept, well, basically that came on top of the House of Lords Act 1999, which had been kept under wraps by mainstream media for a good 8 or 9 years until it came to the signing of the Lisbon Treaty.
Yeah.
So where does the Queen fit into all of this? Is she still our Queen?
No, she's never been the Queen. The sound, the background sound, the noise sound, it actually sounds like plumbing on wiring. If you can imagine.
What, because of them listening in?
Yeah.
Oh, I can see. I mean, not only have I been banned from actually commenting on my timeline, but I can see there's going to be repercussions from this interview.
Yeah. Well, there already has been, So, so you're talking about the Lisbon Treaty, which is 2007, and it came into force in 2009. Well, very briefly, it's an unconscionable contract because there were 20 pages at the rear of it left blank, which all the members signed. So they signed blank sheets of paper so that the EU could add whatever they wanted and it would already be signed and approved. Now that's an unconscionable contract, which means that the Lisbon Treaty is void, right? Ab initio, as though it never existed.
I wasn't aware of the 20 pages. I knew it was a self-amending treaty. I knew because of the House of Lords Act 1999, it made the Lisbon Treaty null and void. But so this is an extra part, which basically means the Lisbon Treaty is null and void.
It's totally null and void. Like a self-correcting treaty is for things like, okay, we want to change the I to the I dot, and we want to add a semicolon here, and we want to refer to a new treaty clause 1A that is just a clarification, not an alteration, not any change to the meaning, not any change to the intent, but just a clarification to remove ambiguity and remove any patent ambiguity. And patent ambiguity falls against the Crown, and it is patently ambiguous having 20 blank pages pre-signed. That's my legal opinion.
Well, of course, then we had a fast forward. We talked about the Lisbon Treaty. There was a lot of misinformation about the Lisbon Treaty put by both sides, just as per usual, a bit like the referendum. And we have the Remainers who keep quoting this website called Full Facts, which is a globalist, financially supported website. And we've got the people who wanted to leave, misunderstanding about the Lisbon Treaty, simply, I think, because they were probably so shocked that so many, well, none of the politicians ever talked about it. So it just seems so outrageous that it's been kept not only quiet till 2009, but quiet for another 10 years because none of the politicians, MEPs, none of them have been talking about the Lisbon Treaty. And it's a case of they were under the impression by, I think, a wrongly circulated email that everything was going to start in 2020. But of course, that wasn't the case at all. These were the finer points where they started putting in the dates of perhaps 2020 and 2022. But most of the Lisbon Treaty, I mean, you know, it brought in the EU constitution from December 2009, for starters. And we've been living under an EU constitution since that day.
Yep. So your letter, a constitutional initiative to override political deadlock, I addressed that and clarified it and removed ambiguity from it on the 9th of September 2019.
All right. When you say my letter, it's not my letter.
Not yours. Yeah, I hear that now.
The guy who's been advising Lord James of Blackheath. Yes, when I did one of the Lisbon Treaty videos, I'd been provided with a couple of letters for people to discuss with their MPs, and that's going back to the end of March. So they were circulated. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of people had been feeling powerless when they saw when they heard about the Lisbon Treaty. They wanted to do something. So yeah, there were hundreds of people that got that letter. But as you pointed out, rightly pointed out last week, or the week before now, that letter was actually had some errors in it.
Yeah. And it's important to remove the ambiguity and the patent ambiguity. And a lot of the ways that they promote ambiguity is by having one sentence discuss two things and the two variables on those two things, and you need to break those up into single sentences. So you're talking about various aspects in 4 different sentences.
But I think that, I mean, the bottom line is this was done in March. We've fast forwarded on to the same constitutional expert who I called Mr. X or Mr. Q. The Mr. Y, the Lord, has now been revealed. It's Lord James of Blackheath, who on the 6th of September had tried to push through an amendment for the House, for the withdrawal bill, and got basically shouted down by the others, charged, saying, we don't want to hear any of this. You know, it's not in the country's best interests. And of course, tonight I've read out about the Foreign and Commonwealth Office's papers, which were produced in 1971, that took us into the EEC at that point on the run up to the referendum. And of course, those papers were kept in vaults for 30 years. And then other people that I know have uncovered them, and they've highlighted the fact that it's all about closer union and taking over our military. So why none of our politicians, because if they came out in 30 years after 71, from 2001, what were all our politicians doing? All these people who've been paid, as MPs, why did nobody actually dare to put their head above the parapet? Presumably they didn't want to die.
Well, how about I'll read almost a page of what I've written, because it kind of answers everything you've just said. Sovereignty was originally breached by the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty, December 2007, enforced December 2009, is an unconscionable contract, sneaky and unjust. It was signed with 20 or so pages left blank at the end that the European Union could add anything to, which all parties pre-approved by signing. This is the definition of unconscionable contract, which automatically renders the Lisbon Treaty void ab initio, as though it never happened. It is as though all signing parties were given children, filmed, shown the film, then signed away their national sovereignty to protect themselves from pedophile charges and public exposure. We must exit the European Union and the Lisbon Treaty by initiating a supra-party political consensus confirming our constitution. The way forward is to, that is rewriting his letter, so that's his line. Make an immediate appeal to the United Nations referencing a potential breach of the 1969 Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, Article 46.1, seeking adjudication that the European Union is attempting to force the United Kingdom to agree to an entirely unconstitutional treaty, totally unacceptable to any British Crown or British sovereignty. Article 46, provisions of internal law regarding competence to conclude treaties. 1. A state may not invoke the fact that its consent to be bound by a treaty has been expressed in violation of a provision of its internal law regarding competence to conclude treaties as invalidating its consent unless that violation was manifest and concerned a rule of its internal law of fundamental importance. This is patently ambiguous, and patent ambiguity falls against the Crown. Previously, the Attorney General addressed the wrong clause in the Vienna Treaty and discouraged this initiative. Such obfuscation is malfeasance, which is willful intention to injure, and misfeasance, which is willful incorrect action, and amounts to nonfeasance, which is failure to perform an act required by law. Caroline Stevens interprets this as which I actually mean the writer when I.
Yes, not me.
Not
Mr. X.
Mr. X, okay. Mr. X interprets this as the correct clause intimates nothing may be entered into which significantly compromises the constitutional integrity of the responding nation. More correctly, which is me, no state may consent to a treaty in violation of internal laws of fundamental importance. Right? No state may consent to a treaty in violation of internal laws of fundamental importance. So all of the EU treaties are of fundamental importance, and they are all in violation of internal laws, so none of them can be consented to. So they're all void ab initio. With the Article 46.1 double and quadruple negatives removed, stated simply in the affirmative, it reads, a state can consent to an apparent infringement of internal law of fundamental importance only if the sovereign overtly wishes to abdicate but is afraid to publicly declare it.
But that's what they reckon, isn't it? They reckon that the Queen is prepared to abdicate.
Yeah. So who's she abdicating to? I'm suggesting that she has been abdicating to me since 1968. Actually, 1967, when I met her younger brother. Now, Elizabeth is not the daughter of King George VI, whereas King George VII that I met in New Zealand, that I was introduced to, he is actually the son of George VI. And he conceived that child on the instructions of George V. And that was called the Second Balfour Agreement, concluded on the 15th of November, 1926.
The Second Balfour Agreement?
Yeah, there's a Second Balfour Agreement.
Greg, I think we were only going to do a show for about half an hour. We've well overrun. Can we do a part 2 perhaps tomorrow evening?
Sure.
Could you just summarize what you've just covered in tonight's show? And if we do part 2 perhaps at the same time tomorrow night, then we can pick up on this, and we could also have a look at people's comments on this live feed.
Okay. I could just
summarize.
Well, I could just add, I could read the next paragraph, which would get you into even more trouble.
I need to be in any more trouble.
Okay, but to whom is Elizabeth abdicating to? The European Union is not her target, but it is Prince Philip's target. Prince Philip is DVD, Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst, meaning he is a World War II German agent for whom the war never ended. Prince Philip wants to give UK sovereignty to the EU, which is essentially Germany and the Rothschilds. Prince Philip was mentored by Lord Mountbatten, now an out-and-out published homosexual pedophile. I published that in 2005 and 2006, and a book was just in the Times being advertised last week, so it's 2019, that confirms Lord Mountbatten was a homosexual pedophile. Lord Louis Mountbatten also mentored Prince Charles, whose best friend was Jimmy Savile, and Prince Charles' half-brother, Prince Andrew, his best friend was the convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and their half-brother, Prince Edward, was convicted of pedophilia in New Zealand, confirmed by the isolated Prince Edward Theatre. And both Elizabeth and Philip were convicted of pedophilia and child murder in the European Common Law Court.
You're saying Prince? Did you say that Prince Edward was convicted? What did he actually? But he didn't go to prison.
Hang on, I've got one more line to read. You get the picture, one of abdication and the royal family crumbling, a foreboding silent acquiescence to abdication, right? And by enacting 46(1), provision of internal law regarding competence to conclude treaties, Elizabeth is illegitimate. She's not the Queen, never has been. She does not have any competence to conclude treaties. So what they do is Elizabeth is abdicating through Article 46(1), through patent ambiguity, and it is the role of the King and identifier of the true King of England to pick this up and identify it.
Well, good luck with this, eh?
Yeah.
So we've got a real mission on our hands. Greg, let's call it a day there. Let's do part 2 tomorrow evening, if I may. And so we'll do one, say 9 o'clock, same time tomorrow night. If that's okay. We've not got any more problems with maintenance, shall we say. Greg, thank you. You've been a star. I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody for watching. I've learned so much tonight that I didn't know before. You know, life is a journey, and it's all about stepping stones, and we all come on this journey at a different point. I hope what you've heard tonight has been helpful. Let's see what the repercussions are of this. Greg, I'll see you tomorrow night, and to everybody watching and listening, I hope to see you again tomorrow night too. So I'll get this uploaded to YouTube, and keep watching. Stay safe. Have a good evening. Good night. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, I'll have a smoke. Do you want to do another one? We stop recording?
Hold on.
Caroline is recording the call. I've got you.
Good evening, everybody. It's Caroline.